welcome back to the channel, guys. Today's an exciting day. I've waited all day for this to unveil my new Mizuno custom fitted set of irons. And the reason we're doing this video today, it's not just to show you what I bought, but it's to talk you through some steps. If you are buying brand new clubs this year, it's to talk you through a few steps, a few checkpoints to make sure everything's all right. I know when they arrive, you know, we can be quite keen and excited to get them in the bag, to get out and play. But you need to just check the quality. Let's check that everything is all right on these irons. So we're going to firstly start by just unboxing them. Let's get the dispatch note out of the box and just check on the dispatch note everything's right. Because, you know, you can have had a custom fit, but things can, you know, go wrong where the pro might have accidentally written the wrong spec down, or, you know, the person that's built the clubs read the spec sheet wrong. So let's just make sure on the dispatch note. In fact, we've got a little bit of a goodie bag here. You don't see this very much from manufacturers. We've got a couple of balls. The Mizuno RB Tour X, which I'd imagine is their premium ball. I've never tried them. We've got some club oil, a little bit of a cloth, and a club cleaner. So that's a nice touch from Mizuno. And in here we've got the spec sheet, which should tie up to what I've ordered. So let's see if this is right. So we've got the Mizuno Pro 223 irons, that's right. Modus Free Tour 120 extra stiff shafts, ½ inch longer, 1 degree upright. We've got the +4 charcoal grips, mid-size, with the logo down, which I asked for, and standard lofts. So everything looks okay so far, but we're gonna test Mizuno now on their quality control. So I've got the clubs lined up on the counter, and I've got the grips nice and square. And what firstly I'm checking is that the grips are all the same length. Now that might seem a bit odd if it's the first time you've ever heard that, but when you fit grips, it can be quite easy if you're not focusing. I mean, if these guys are fitting a lot of grips, you've got to check that they've not sort of put too much tape on and stretched the grip, or, you know, obviously there could be too much hanging over the butt and they've not come down the shaft. But in this case, they're very perfectly matched in length. So really happy, tick the boxes on that. Now in terms of the shafts, these shafts will have all been one length and they'll have been trimmed to size for each individual iron. And it's most likely that they will have been trimmed from the tip of the golf club and the butt of the golf club. So it's important that you check the alignment to make sure that all the decals are in some sort of pattern, whether it's a straight pattern or whether they're stepped, to make sure they match. And as you can see in this case, you know, the shaft bands are perfectly matched square. So again, happy with that. If we move down towards the bottom of the club, the ferrules, which are the finishing touch, you know, they're not always flush. You know, obviously we see a lot of golf clubs in the industry, and, you know, sometimes that can be where mistakes are made because, you know, they make them in such scale that sometimes maybe the heads haven't fully dried and there can be sort of residue or gaps between, you know, the head and the ferrule, and they're not finished very well. So if these are your sort of set of golf clubs you ordered brand new, these are the things that you need to check. Now, I can safely say, Mizuno, thumbs up. You've done a fantastic job. Really happy with the way they've been built. Everything looks, you know, in order. Now, one thing you've got to do before you get these out on the course, before you use them, is have some form, some way of being able to identify them, you know, in case of theft or, you know, I'm going to give you a little bit of an example. Tahid, who's been on the channel, you know, bought a set of Sim 2 Max irons when they were first launched. He was doing a bit of chipping and putting at his local golf club, and he left his wedge and his putter at the side of the putting green, and it never got handed in. And Tahid, being a newish golfer, sort of, we're looking on eBay thinking he'd be able to match up, which I knew he wouldn't find one the same, because he'd had a custom fit, he got, you know, upgrade shafts, upgrade grips, you know, and so on. But funny enough, he found his own club for sale, and he went to the person's house who, you know, obviously arranged to go and collect it, saying to this guy, we're going to buy it. And the guy, there were a bit of a debate about it, and he says, no, it's his iron, and he's not found it, and, you know, that kind of thing. And it clearly is, because he got the putter for sale as well. So when Tahid rang the police, it's took him over 12 months to get that iron back, and all because he couldn't identify it. He couldn't provide enough evidence that it was his iron. So he'd not took any sort of serial numbers, or he'd not got any markings on that club to basically say it was his iron. We had to write a letter, you know, and all sorts. And it took him 12 months to get that club back. So, you know, this is the perfect time now, before I get these, you know, irons on the course, is to mark them in a way that I can identify them and actually take a picture of that identification in case there, you know, any issues like that where you might leave an iron at a golf club, or, you know, or so on. So I've had a look at these Mizuno irons actually. There's not any serial numbers or any way of identifying them. So what I'm going to do is, here where there's some stamping, I'm going to just infill with a little bit of white paint. So my irons are separate, you know, are different to all the other 223 Pros. So that if for any instance it did get onto, you know, eBay or anything like that, I'd be able to identify that that's my iron. And I'm going to take a picture of them identifying marks to make sure that I know that they're mine. Now, before I put them in the bag, there's one more thing I'm going to do. It might seem a little bit tedious, this, but when I buy new irons, I want them to last. You know, my irons, I'm hoping they're going to last me sort of 6-7 years. My eye blades, I think, were 6-year-old. And I hate when shaft bends get tatty. So what I'm going to do is, I'm going to get a little bit of tape, a clear tape, and just go over the top. So I've done it on my wedges already. I'll put a close-up of these in, because these are new. You'll be able to see there's just a little bit of sellotape right over the top of the shaft bands. I mean, it's barely any weight for you sort of golf geeks who say, well, it's gonna add weight to your shafts. I mean, we're talking, what, maybe 10 inch of sellotape. It's not enough that for me to notice a difference anyway. But what it's going to do is going to keep that shaft band looking really fresh. I remember when I had some Titleist irons quite a few years back, I did this, and when I sold my irons about 5 years later, the shaft bands were just like brand new. And I think that does add a lot of value, and it makes the clubs look really good when you can keep them shaft bands looking fresh. So before these go in the bag, we're just going to cover these with some tape. So now that's done, it's time to put them in the bag. And I've seen so many ways of putting golf clubs in bags, but I think the best way, this is going to open a can of worms, but I like to keep them in some sort of order where we've got sort of lob wedge, sand wedge, pitching wedge, 9-iron, if you've got a carry bag. So your bottom compartments, you've got your shortest clubs. And then we're going to sort of, in the next one, we're going to go 9, 8, 7. And then 4, 5, 6. And then woods in the top. Now, I know some people like to have their irons at the top, because what they say is that, well, I can't see the irons if the woods are at the top. But in terms of sort of bag clatter, this is probably the best way to stop, you know, your graphite shafts getting clattered. If you get the graphite clubs up at the top, out the way, then the irons aren't going to be sort of clattering around and scratching, you know, your graphite shafts and things like that. And certainly with your putter, if you can keep your putter up at the top, out the way, so it should look something like that. I can't wait to get these out on the course. So you're probably wondering, why did I go for the 223 Pro? In all honesty, it's probably not the most forgiving forged iron, because if I were going to go for the most forgiving forged iron, I would have probably gone for the JPX, the 223 JPX forged. But this one just appealed to me a little bit more as a really as a low handicap golfer. I can still strike a good iron. It just looks a little bit more compact in the head, and the top lines are just a little bit thinner. I'm really, really looking forward to play these. You know, I've not had a forged iron for so long, and the difference in feel between these and my eye blades, it's sensational. You know, the feedback through the head is incredible. Now, I understand with forged that they might sort of clatter a little bit, but you know, I'm going to be quite honest with you. One of the main reasons I went and tried the Ping i230 is because I've always loved the longevity of Ping. You know, how long they've lasted. I love the, you know, back office and, you know, after sales service and repairs and stuff under warranty. They are the best. I'm sorry, but if any other brands can get on par with them, then brilliant. But it does take some doing, because you know they really do make decisions to their own discretion, rather than just, you know, thinking, oh, it's a 2-year warranty and that's it. You know, they really do look at each case individually. So I can't say enough about how good Ping are in that matter of a sense. But when I tried the i230s, and when I tried Paul Emlyn's from the golf show, and I saw how much they were clattering and marking after only a few weeks, I thought, well, if they're going to mark like that, I might as well just get forged irons and just get something that feels really good, and, you know, maybe forget about the longevity and think more about performance, and that's why I've really, you know, it tipped me to going to the forged iron, and why I've ended up with these really. I did consider T100s, but I think over the last few years, my last T, well, I had the AP2, the 718s, which I really enjoyed. I think as soon as they moved into T100s, they've progressively over the years got a little bit smaller and a little bit more compact. And when I actually tried the T100, I found it a lot more difficult to use than this one. So ultimately, that's why I've gone for these. More, you know, easy use, look great, forged, and you know, I can't wait to go and use them. And I have actually had a round with these, if you remember. I tried James Robinson's when he first got his. We played at Woolley, and I played a few holes with his irons and absolutely loved them. So the feel were unbelievable. So I can't wait to get these out on the course. It shouldn't be too long. And I hope if you get some new irons this year, you might consider just doing a few of them checkpoints before you actually get out on the course. Guys, I hope you've enjoyed that video. I'll see you in a few days' time. Bye.